So for the next session, we have another panel, and in this panel, we'll be talking about the technical business barriers and opportunities. So we'll be bringing this back to telco, and we will be talking to our panelists about what they see as some of the challenges and some of the opportunities of PQC in telecommunications.
Test.
We're all friends up here. We can share microphones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. COVID's over, right?
Is the mic? That's good? Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to PQTN in Telecom, the Technical and Business Barriers and Opportunities. My name is Vinod Choi. I'm a 5G security architect with Verizon. My main responsibilities include threat modeling, developing secure architectures, coming up with requirements in 5G slicing, 5G roaming, and quantum-safe solutions. So my journey into quantum probably started 2017 timeframe. And I was mainly looking at symmetric keys and symmetric keys in the sense of how do you protect the radio interface between the UE, between the device and the G node B or the RAN. And we thought at that time that the 128-bit key size was short based on Grover's algorithm. So we had contributions, a joint contribution with MITRE, John Hopkins, NSA, but at that time it was determined that it was not that critical. So it goes back 2017. And I think, and we depended on NIST and PQC, standardization as the, cornerstone to do the quantum safe solutions for us. So we have, a great set of panelists here. In diverse fields. I would request each one of you to introduce yourself, and starting from Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Van Meter. I'm the Federal SE Director for Juniper Networks, and my association with post-quantum is mostly related to encryption for securing federal government communications, because that's who I support. And so that's commercial solutions for classified tunnel-in-tunnel sorts of activities, which basically means making sure my company has support for all the algorithms we need to have, and FIPS 140-3 and things of that nature. So that's pretty much my involvement. Kind of stay on top of that.
My name is Avesso Jetty, VP of Engineering at DigiCert. Been involved with cryptography for over 15 years. I'm a cryptographer by education. And as far as PQC, it started back in 2016 when NIST had a process, and my specialty is zero knowledge proof and multi-party computation. So we decided to make a submission. It did not make it to the final round, but the learning journey has been absolutely amazing.
And hi, Mike Silverman. You just heard me, but my journey actually started in 1996, doing actually AI academic research back then. So about 30 years of that. Working mostly in financial services through the years. But my last firm before FSISAC, long story short, they had a major breach and they did nothing but pivot to security. And so everyone there got really acquainted with security, cryptography. And so I'd say that started my journey. And then when I came to FSISAC, I took both of those realms, the technology and the security, and started leading up the PQC working group.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with Tom again. I mean, given all the challenges we've had in cybersecurity, right? I mean, you have ransomware attacks, nation states, attacks, exfiltration of data, subscriber data leakage, etc. And I think we've kind of touched on all these things from the previous panel and the speakers. But how do you see this? How do you deal with this new quantum adversary? Like, I'll tell you, it's a challenge for Verizon.
Yeah. So I think the base principle is you need to stay safe, right? And it's going to take a while for post-quantum protocols or that implement algorithms to get implemented and propagated. So for starters, you need to be looking at things you can do to secure what you have now. So starting with IKV1, NSA put out in their algorithm verifications for CSFC that you could use pre-shared keys. And then, of course, they've moved from IKV1 to IKV2, so that's RFC 8784 has a way for you to use pre-shared keys as part of your encryption standards. And those, of course, are symmetric keys are not susceptible to Shor's algorithm.
Yeah,
so
Grover's.
Grover's, yeah. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, sorry.
It's not susceptible to Shor's algorithm.
Yeah, not the mathematician, sorry. So that's on the practical perspective. Do something now, and they've offered the opportunity for some years to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's my first shot.
Okay. Good. So it is. You're absolutely right. It's not symmetric keys are not susceptible to Shor's algorithm. However, short of the keys, they could be potentially susceptible to Grover's algorithm.
Take your word for it. I looked up. I was doing some research getting ready for the panel. I was looking at Grover's. I was doing some research getting ready for the panel, and I looked at Grover's algorithm, and I said, "Oh, that's nice."
Okay, Avesta. Your PKI provider. Same question. How do you deal with a quantum adversary? If you think about it, kind of mentioned that the adversary is there, but it's still not there. So there's some uncertainty there, but how are you dealing?
Yeah, it's look, this is a Y2K without a date.
Yeah.
We all knew 1999 at this time it will hit. When it comes to Y2Q, we really don't know when this is going to happen. My next sentence is going to be very controversial, but as a cryptographer, we actually don't recommend directly jumping into PQC. Let's go 50 years back, right? In 70s, when we had RSA, it was the only algorithm that we had, and we had one promise that it will take thousands or millions of years for RSA to be broken. As a cryptographer, with enough money and enough time, anything could be broken. Now, as a PKI provider, the first step for what we recommend to CIOs, to CISOs or CEOs is visibility. I always challenge every single CIO that I meet to pose one question. Do you know if you have any SHA-1 in your environment? And you did the same thing as well. Silence. I hear nothing. There's no guarantee. There's no probability. I even take it further. Can you guarantee that there is MD5?
Oh, yeah. Good question.
If there is RC4, we keep going back, right? Yeah. So if you don't have visibility, then really this dilithium to crystal kyber, it doesn't really matter because you're just moving from one aspect and rest of the environment is beyond. So for us, we're looking at quantum as the lowest hanging fruit to make the best business case to go to your board members and say, if I can implement a solution for quantum, I can gain visibility. If I gain visibility, I can employ automation. If I deploy automation, I can go ahead and be crypto agile, right? So these are all those type of while loops as an engineer that you will go through to make sure that you're protected against quantum computers.
Okay, great. When Gary mentioned SHA-1, I was thinking the exact same thing. I've seen MD5. I've seen MD5 in standards, so.
I have customers today, MD5. Okay. Why does my BGP work in MD5? Because it's not a FIPS algorithm.
Mike, same question.
Yeah, so I agree. You should start with an inventory, knowing where you are before you jump right into PQC. As I mentioned in my last talk, for us in financial services, we're worried about what's the thing that's going to reduce the trust the most within the network. And I think we'll talk about Harvest Now Decrypt later. We could talk about how relevant that is or not. But one of the more important issues for us is actually on the certificate side of things. It is, can someone claim, I'm Bank of FS ISAC, let's say, if someone else can claim that they are also Bank of FS ISAC, That's the biggest problem we have in financial services. Look, financial services is really reliant on the networks side, on the telcos, on the Jupiters of the world, of the API gateways of the world. They're going to be some of our first line of defense. The financial services firms themselves don't do it all. There is a whole ecosystem here. When we really think about cryptographic management, we think about certificate management and ensuring that you're doing business with who you think you are. That's the biggest risk we have.
Wasn't there something similar, some years back, but they had instead of Royal Bank of Canada, they had a Royal Bank in the Cayman or something, and it spoofed certificates.
Yep.
Question to Mike. How are you preparing your PQC rollout? I know you mentioned that, of course, the certificate is the most important thing. What is your most important asset, right? I'll tell you, for an operator like us, our subscriber data is extremely important, right? Our subscriber profile is extremely important. Session keys are extremely important. So subscriber data, profile, location of where a subscriber is, all those are extremely important. So what are the assets that are critically important for you?
So let me take a step back. If an adversary gets a cryptographic relevant quantum computer, it's not as if they're going to put a press release out saying, yep, we got it, okay? They're just not. So we have to look at it of what are they going to likely try to do? Subscriber data is important, but if a firm is doing the right things, if you're rotating your keys in an appropriate way, if the customer data, the account data, the trades in their basket or the portfolio that they have is likely going to change very drastically from year one to year two. So yes, you might get their social security number and account numbers, and of course that's really bad and we want to protect that. But for us, it's more of the who am I trading with, and I had another thought, it's lost, it escaped me, but that's essentially it. Like making sure that we as the network are feeling confident that we're doing the right trades with trading partners in a safe way that makes our customers feel safe.
Okay, can I ask a follow-up question on
Yes.
that? But then you have enough time, right? Because it's not how it's now decrypt later, because it's authenticity and probably integrity of that communications.
Do we? I don't know if we do.
Compared to how it's now decrypt later, wouldn't you not have relatively more time?
Yes, but, right? We have point of sale devices that we have to work with. We have customer cards that we have to replace. We have networks that we have to do. We have exchanges that we have to upgrade. It isn't each individual bank or FI, sure, could they manage the chain with a Chrome browser or whatever down to their customer and update things that way? Sure. But when you start talking about the integration as the network as a whole, that takes way longer.
Great. I
I want
completely
to
agree.
add something to what Mike said here, because I personally don't think we have enough time. We all talk about harvest now, decrypt later, but there is another attack that we refer to as verify now, forge later. And that is applicable to anyone. It's a SIM card that you're selling, now we're going to eSIMs, is a BTS that you're deploying in South America that you don't want to go ahead and deploy it in the next 10 years, is a sensor that you're sending to the bottom of the ocean that utilizes 5G. These are all the devices that are going to last for the next 20, 30 years.
You're right.
Right?
You're right.
And we all know how hard it is to manage brownfield devices, meaning the devices that are already out there.
Yeah.
So we don't have enough time. The time that we had was yesterday, where we had to think about, since we have government in the room, DARPA refers to this as security by design. Design it with security from the get-go, and then you can push it, deploy it, and maintain it as you're moving forward.
Okay.
Let me add on. A lot of point of sale systems may not be able to upgrade to PQC. Really small memory, small bandwidth. Oh, let's say we go PQC. The negotiation, Google did a test. The negotiation of PQC algorithms uses up 5 times the bandwidth on session negotiation versus traditional RSA. Are we ready for that from a bandwidth and server load perspective?
Good.
A lot of work. So I question how much time we have.
Good. So, asking Avesta again. I mean, from a priority perspective, you're putting Harvest Now, Decrypt Later constrained devices that you can reach, and authenticity or whether trust anchors in them, you put them on the same priority level. How do you prioritize? Are they deprioritizing certain things? I mean, how?
Yeah, definitely they're not all on the same level.
Okay.
We do have devices that are not capable of handling this large cryptographically keys. We do have devices that are towards the end of their life. On the other hand, we have applications that are not getting refreshed so frequently. We have data that has a different category of priority that we are going to deal with it. So this really depends on the posture of an organization. But one thing often is getting forgotten is that it's not only one organization, it's the vendors that you're dealing with as well.
Correct.
If I purely enforce PQC from, let's say, one bank and the other bank doesn't do it for any reason, then I really don't communicate via the same language. So this goes back into requiring to have level of regulations and compliance to make these use cases kind of mandatory and prioritize those for organizations.
Okay.
And if I may, Vesa reminded me of something that IBM in the room is going to like hearing this. You'd be surprised or scared to know how much of financial services runs on mainframes still today. Try finding COBOL developers these days. The IRS has taken most of them here in the States, but that's a problem too, okay?
I was just going to say, most of the folks that I deal with, we're worried about nation states who have the budgets and have the personnel to do the harvest now, decrypt later attacks.
Okay.
So that's why you hear me being paranoid about the use of the symmetric keys, because that's what you've got available now. Forget about the post-quantum stuff. Use what you have now, because eventually you're going to get a quantum computer that's going to be able to break stuff out. And the nation states have the money to store that stuff for a long time. And then you get the issue of forging activities.
Okay. I think it's a nice segue to the next question. I mean, there are conflicting recommendations on, key sizes for AES 128. And I think, like the ANSI and the BSI have certain recommendations, but it's probably because of the theoretical difficulty of, achieving Grover's algorithm. What's your view on AES 256? I'll tell you my take later at the end. But
Oh, you get to go last? Is that how it is? That's fair.
So NIST does have an FAQ out there that talks about how safe it is to use 128, 192, 256, and they give some nice comments about, we'll let you know when things are safe. The fact, we're talking post-quantum, the fact that CNSA 2.0 is out there and it wants AES 256 says it all to me. That's where you need to be focused. Now, I realize there are some sets of equipment out there that can't do that. Well, do the best you can. So that's why.
I think one thing is often getting forgotten when it comes to doubling the key size, either being asymmetric or symmetric. Just imagine an X and Y, graph. The performance, whenever you're doubling the key size, will also be impacted, right? That's why we are not recommending when it comes to asymmetric to go from 2048 to 4096 to 8K. And same for AES. 128 to 256, the impact of Grover is basically reducing the strength to half. But what would happen if we go to 512? We can't just keep doubling this key size. Hence, there needs to be an approach to potentially move from symmetric to other safe algorithms that they may exist. So again, don't only consider doubling the key size. Yes, for the foreseen future is good, but it's not the end state.
Okay.
I completely echo what my colleagues here said. Another thing to think about is the longevity of the time, right? So, at times we want to use 512. I know NIST doesn't necessarily recommend that, but we say why not? And in many cases, we're going to use that for digital signatures of long-held assets. Think of contracts. Think of, here in the States, we have 30-year mortgages. So you have to hold that contract for 30 years plus 7 years. Right? That's 37 years. So we want to try to future-proof things as much as we can so we don't have to replace and update all of those digital signatures. That's a huge, huge task. So the higher we can get on the get-go, the better off we're going to be for the long run.
But on the symmetric key itself, where do you stand? AES 128, AES 256?
Higher the better in the right use cases, but then we have things like algorithmic trading or high-frequency trading where milliseconds matter. So it is all use case dependent.
Okay. So, I think it's exactly what I've been thinking as well, is that in in our core network, in Verizon's core network, or in general core networks, 256-bit AES is a given. SHA-256 is a given. SHA-384, I'm not too sure. But when it comes to our base stations, if right now, most of the base stations and the devices AES-128, it's a big upgrade. And I think you guys said something, when it comes to devices, a certain, constrained devices, it's a little challenging there. So I think maybe 128 is good. But if there is the view where I have a slightly different view is that the jump from AES 128 to 256, from implementation perspective in a hardware, is not that big. When it comes to integrity, we use a lot of radio resources, there's impact. But I think from a RAN perspective or device perspective, the amount of computational impact is not that much. And I would personally like it to be AES 256. So I think we are all in agreement there.
I think we are. Yeah.
Okay. I think the next question, I think, has been touched upon. And I was kind of surprised with what Gary mentioned, in the sense that hybrid schemes. I mean, I was not expecting, someone from the government coming hybrid scheme, because I'm probably listening somewhere else. They were not being too much on the hybrid side of things. How about hybrid schemes, Mike? And I've heard you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, given the age of some of our clients, and endpoints or callers or customers, whatever it may be, some of these systems may be mainframe, maybe older systems, that we're going to set standards of, here is a goal. We want to be Kyber. We want to do this or that. But there's going to be a long time before everyone can get up to speed on that. So we need to have ways of doing session negotiation. What is the highest strength algorithm that we can do between the two of us and make that successful? Again, we talked about the hardware performance. Not all point of sale systems are going to be able to do the latest, greatest things. So we want to up their security as much as we can, but not always be able to do that. So I think there's going to be a hybrid world for some time.
Okay.
Yeah, look, it's, I think IPv4, IPv6, we all have seen it. It's 2024 and we still haven't moved. So,
We have not, no.
I mean, if there's one thing I know about internet, that there's not a switch that enables you to move from point A to point B. I think hybrid generally is a very loose term, right? There's multiple different ways to utilize it as a hybrid. There's 4 different methods and so forth. And IETF is working on those. And all of these solutions are out there to enable the legacy systems to still communicate while we are moving to PQC. Most likely is going to take decades. Again, SHA-1 is a very good example of that. 2017, I remember it was a March timeframe, and here we are, 2024, and still we are dealing with it. And RSA to PQC is a much, much larger transition. So hybrid is great. Some could argue against it and say, RSA is broken, right? Why are we enabling it and allowing it? Well, we really can't stop it. I have been part of Symantec where we stopped SHA-1, and a transportation system in half of the US stopped, right? Because they didn't realize that they didn't have a solution for it to migrate to. So hybrid is definitely going to be there. Depending what type of a hybrid you will choose on your use case, again, being composite or chameleons or so forth, there are solutions out there, but definitely for the next 10 years, we are going to go through this transition with a hybrid approach.
If I may? Oh, please, go Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to say, agree with everything, but I think 10 years is, I'm thinking 20 years, I'm thinking 2030. It's going to take a long time.
Well, 2030, 2033, I think those are the CNS.
20 to 30 years.
So let me put it in practical terms. Financial services has something called separation of duties, and we have it's really hard for us to change things in production for good reasons. You don't want us testing, especially on, let's say, Black Friday here in the United States, on credit card payment systems and things. There's real process on how things get changed. Let me put a case in point. Anyone here remember Log4j? Raise a hand. And how many holiday breaks were ruined by Log4j? And the year before that, it was SolarWinds, and so I didn't get a break for years. But all Log4j was a patch. Here is a patch. All right, there were 4, but forget that. Finally, the latest one. Just go and install this whenever you can. It is independent of anything else. Just install this patch, and you're good to go. We're still not done with Log4j, right? And it's just a patch. And that gives us the issues of timing here. Now you're going to tell us, oh, it's not just a patch. No, you have to rewrite systems and sometimes replace systems, and coordinate those across the ecosystem. Yeah. I'm looking more at your timeline, Tom, versus a quicker timeline.
How about QKD?
Sure, I'll lead off with that one. Sure.
Give him the softball questions.
Yeah,
Come
thanks.
on, that's.
So I think, at least within our company, the perception is that QKD maybe isn't fully validated yet for security purposes, and it's going to take a while, and we're kind of thinking that we need some more proofs and some more certifications before it's a viable solution. It looks like to me that like the UK government, the US government, not particular fans of it. Doesn't mean that it's not good, doesn't mean it's not going to come around with time, but that's kind of where we sit.
Yeah, QKD requires hardware. At least at DigiServe, we are not part of the hardware business.
Very different.
That being said, I remember I used to attend ETSI. This is a European Telecommunication Standards. And a few years ago, it was PQC versus QKD. And now they're complementing each other. One could be used for key distribution, one could be used for PQC. I agree with Tom. I don't think we are where we're supposed to be. We are still dealing with fiber, let alone adding, QKD to it and how complex that system will be. We do have partners in Europe, British Telecom. We have helped them build some of their QKD, but we don't see the practicality for it for a mass deployment.
So when I was at ETSI in Singapore, there was two sides of the room, literally. There was the mathematicians who wanted PQC, and there was a physicist who wanted QKD. And this was, if you remember West Side Story, this Jets versus the Sharks, and there was real competition between these two sides. Poor Dr. Moscow was getting pelted with questions on stage because he's a mathematician, and the physicists were not happy with him. I'm a computer engineer by undergrad, so I don't play in either camp. So I will tell you, financial services firms are testing QKD as part of a comprehensive strategy to do data center to data center communications where possible from the physical limitations of things, whether that includes satellite or not. But the answer I think we're going with, it's both, not an either or solution at this point. I think there's use cases for both.
Okay, very good. Impact and performance. Tom,
Sure. You're going to have impact on CPU and memory, and that's just the way it is. But if you're lucky, you've got hardware implementations for your bulk data encryption, so that maybe that won't be so bad. But your CPUs are going to be busy doing all the key exchanges and figuring that stuff out. But the reality is you have to protect your data, so it doesn't really matter. You have to figure it out, and you're going to have to put some resources to get behind it.
Yeah, so this one is an extremely interesting one. One of the teams that I lead at DigiServe works on devices specifically. So contrary to the public belief, the PQC algorithms are extremely fast. Matter of fact, they're much faster than ours say. That being said, the key sizes is much larger. So if you're dealing with a medical device, let's talk about an insulin pump as a real use case, that I want to make it PQC secured because it holds X amount of personal identifying information or PII. I have to be able to put today dilithium, because it has the smallest key size versus a Spinix or Falcon in that device. If that has a TPM, trusted platform modular, it might be capable, but it still is not enough memory. And also, when it comes to critical care systems, I shouldn't compromise the main functionality, which in this case is infusing insulin, for the security. So it doesn't matter what happens, I still should be capable of doing the primary job. So what we are doing and what the industry is doing right now is trying to figure it out if you are able to optimize the key sizes, utilize different techniques, and enable the existing brownfield devices to still utilize these PQC keys without recalling that hardware and put it down there. Now, to memory and CPU impact, it's definitely there. There are a number of different ways to optimize that. Go for hire assembly developers, not a problem. But at the end of the day, the hardware is limited, and you can just go as far as you can before replace it with a hardware specific.
Mike, can I have a follow-up question to that? But I'll let Mike.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
Good.
Okay. All right. So the cryptographic agility paper we put out says, there's a lot of different dimensions to this. One of which we haven't said yet, is the reliance on HSM and your vaults within financial services firms. Those are going to get upgraded and taxed to no end. That's where we should have been doing it. In fact, we should have made these migrations and investments a while ago. We've been pushing it out too much to the edge, or whatever you want to call that, right? So that's going to be a critical part for performance, is ensuring those capabilities are there. we've talked about how the point of sale systems themselves on the extreme opposite end of things are going to be hardware constrained and limited. But I'm also going to talk about the performance in the middle. Again, it's the API gateways, the Cloudflares, the Akamais of the world that we're reliant on to do these things. It's the Junipers and the Ciscos of the world we're reliant on. There's a whole lot of things in the chain that we're really looking at. Performance is not just one thing here. You got to look at the whole ecosystem and the whole stack together.
Okay. So the question I was going to, follow-up question I was going to, isn't, I mean, just the handshake part? I mean, once we're done with the handshake part, are we not good? I mean, Taylor's handshake and the Ike exchange and...
Yeah, you're opening a can of worms.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, we begin with key encapsulation. So you can go ahead and deploy your modular lattice KEM, which is what Chrome by default does, by the way. If you have the latest version of Chrome and you connect to Cloudflare, you're already utilizing Crystal Kyber for the KEM. Now, I think it was Mike mentioned that it's just more than that handshake. If you're dealing with signatures, that's where it gets tricky. And signatures are often getting used for the identity of that device. If I have an X509 certificate, which provides the identity, I have to make sure that a signature is valid. In order for me to receive a signature, I need to have a public and private key. In the case of asymmetric, the private key is pretty large. I mean, the cycle keeps going. The KEM part of it, or key encapsulation, is quite simple in a sense. Hence, most of the device manufacturers are going after KEM, which is software implementation. You know, it doesn't really have a peak on hardware.
I think I'm going to focus on digital there. So, I mean, so basically, do you have a production grade PKI right now that can do, you know, issue certs that are signed using MLDSA, SLSDSA?
We do. So I have to separate this between public hierarchy and private hierarchy. So public hierarchy is where you are dealing with certificate for your websites. If you're going to vast majority of the banks, they have a publicly trusted certificate. And in order for you to be a publicly trusted CA, you need to follow the CA browser forum guidelines. The CA browser forum has not approved any of the NEST algorithms. Therefore, we are not capable of issuing publicly trusted certificates.
Got it.
On the private side, if you're issuing certificates for devices, for telco, whatever that might be, we already have capabilities of issuing MLDSA as well as SLHDSA. So those are already there. You can create your private route. Matter of fact, multiple customers already have done this. They have their intermediate CA and an entity, and they're issuing PQC.
And they can scale well? I mean, to do
The
this.
scale's fine. There's no problem with the scale. I had to mention this is pure PQC. It's not hybrid, meaning you still have your classical routes as well as a PQC route and ICA.
And then what type of certificate management protocol do you use, like CMP version 2, SCAP?
You can receive this from ESP, SCAP, ACME. The protocol for receiving these certificates doesn't really matter. What is really important is that the client has the capability of supporting the process of key generation for these algorithms, which you can utilize Open Quantum Safe, and integration with OpenSSL and so on.
Anything?
Actually, it's somewhat related. One problem we do still have, even though you're doing great work there, and yeah, I know you personally are doing it all, so it's fine. But one thing we're really still struggling with is CBOM. Cryptographic bill of materials, right? And yes, you're doing their certificates, but how do we lay it all together and store it in a common way? The QSF, the Quantum Safe Financial Forum, which is a partnership with Europol and FSISAC in Europe, along with IBM, is trying to define that as an open source standard. And that has not been defined yet fully, so it hasn't been implemented yet fully. So while we can do these certificate updates, we don't have a great way of storing all of that in a really good, cohesive manner. So I think we're still struggling. We're still waiting on that one there.
Okay, great.
Adding something very quick to what Mike said is extremely important. We all mostly utilizing SBOM, software bill of material. There is mandates for it and so forth. But this cryptographic bill of material very soon is going to be a line item for your auditors.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what you have? What version of what library you have? What key sizes you have?
DORA is already starting that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even for us issuing these PQC certificates, there is the other portion of it, which is know your CBOM before issuing this PQC certificates.
Makes sense. Tom, are there use cases within your organization or your customers that you see where you use SLH stickler hash DSA?
Yeah, not really. We're focused right now on FIPS 203 and 204. That's pretty much it. Nothing that I'm aware of.
Alessa?
We do. I mean, obviously, we are issuing anything from MLChem, which is FIPS 203, to FIPS 205, so the signatures.
Got it. Yeah.
And the priority for financial services is the async, so it's Kyber is the number one priority at the moment, but again, given hardware constraints or limitations or use cases, the others may be appropriate.
Okay. I'll be quick. I've been told 2 minutes or 1 minute.
We're getting the hook?
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Wait,
That's me, I'm
listen.
talking too much, sorry.
Coming to opportunities, right? I mean, I can clearly see, as a security practitioner, I can clearly see security opportunities. Kind of where you mentioned CBOM and using that to basically evaluate our security posture and probably revamp some things. And if there is a PKI in an island somewhere, how do we tie all that? So I see that as an opportunity there. But what is the opportunity you see, Tom, in your thing? More IPsec, security gateways, and then...
So my company's been on a, right at this point, multi-year journey to, I hate to use the word zero trust, and it's an acronym that everybody just uses to sell consulting hours.
It's not a product.
Yeah, it's not a product, it's a strategy. But we've been on this multi-year journey, tightening up, basically reviewing all the security perspectives, and in this case for encryption, what are you doing internally? What are you doing externally? Making sure the things that you have are solid, educating the workforce every 3 months or so we get a internal learning that we have to do on what about this? What about this other thing? What about scammers? And I even got one for, I want you to practice knowing how to do a phishing email response. So someone said on the dark web, my social security number ended up, or something with the company ended up on the dark web. So I got a special email from our IT folks saying, okay, I want you to practice going here and sending us, know how to report a phish. Don't use this phish report, use this other phish report. I'm like, thanks. So I think the opportunity is to keep doing an overall perspective and tighten up everything, because we'll be slinked, but see if you can tighten up everything across the board. And I know we're out of time, so I'll shut up.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to talk to hundreds of executives in the past few months over PQC. And the common theme that I see is what I refer to as CIA model for them. What they care about is cost, innovation, and availability. And when it comes to PQC, availability is what really matters here. If a certificate expires, their availability goes down. This could be for a bank, this could be for a satellite company, this could be for Verizon, doesn't really matter. If encryption algorithm is broken, their availability is also gone. So at the end of the day, the business case that they can take to their board members is that if we get visibility, if we do automation, if we are crypto agile, and if we add PQC to it, we will increase our availability on the long run.
Okay.
So we need to keep the trust between ourselves, between our ecosystems, between telco, between hardware vendors, between all of us. And, I think one of the best outcomes of this is if somehow an adversary gets a hold of a cryptographic computer, a relevant computer, and can decrypt our traffic, we're not alone going to figure out that that's happened, right? When you have Occam's razor, if you hear hoofbeats, you think horses, not zebras, right? So the first thing, if we see our data being exfilled, we're going to think a bad certificate, a bad password, some sort of admin credentials. It's not going to be until you start talking with your peers, and it may take you a long time before you admit, hey, we have data exfilled. But now that this is on our radar, we may go, is this possible? And so that actually opens up the community to saying, ooh, this is a real possibility. We need to be collaborating more on security in these cases. So I think it's a really positive outcome in that regard.
Okay, great. I would like to thank the panelists and thanks everyone here.
Thank you.
So thank you, faithful followers. You're still here. So we promised during the seminar that we would leave the Q&A till the end. So step to the left. There we go. So are there any questions to any of the panelists or earlier speakers, or myself or Laurie? There you go.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Jose Horn. I'm from Miami, by the way, from Florida. So I am the chair of the Terminal Working Group. Good luck. Okay, sorry again. So we work at the GSMA, in the terminal working group, and we see that maybe there is a huge gap between you guys and the mobile carrier that we have. So we work with small and medium operators, not the tier one. They don't have the resources to put people, to assist to all your teams. And this is what we face day by day. So let me tell you, for example, deploying RCS. I mean, we see a bunch of security holes, operators transferring all the traffic through internet instead of their own network. So even deploying eSIM profiles, we see weak algorithms for OTA. And so my perception is there is a huge gap between the TERI and the small and medium operators here in the area. So what you guys can do to, solve this situation?
Well, I want to echo what you're saying because, yes, the tier one banks across the globe, the GSIBs, globally systemic important banks, they're the ones making the investments. Your little credit unions or community, bridging societies in England, they can't make those investments, right? Some banks are two guys and a dog in a garage, right? And so they really don't have the resources to be investing in this PQC thing. So that's where we're relying on the largest banks to actually make the most progress for the sector, at least in financial services. So I'd like to think that there's a similar model in telco for that.
I don't think that's a similar model, because if you look back at rip and replace,
Thank you.
that's exactly the point. They don't have the budgets. I've seen this. I mean, we tried to implement TLS with some of the carriers, and they couldn't do that either. So it's just that you need to work with the associations and lobby the government to make sure that there will be budget for that migration.
That's my...
Absolutely. I mean, the government and the industry needs to help each other to make sure that we remain secure.
Yeah.
I tend to disagree. I think it's very much like the banks. The problem is that we
Sorry, use the mic. Thank you.
we don't have the, you might say, we haven't put enough importance on quantum, okay? So it's a matter of when do we start dividing up the budget in such a way that we can start addressing more and more of these problems. But we do have people working on PQC, all right? It's just that our focus is on 5G and 6G and those things, okay? So it's a matter and AI. Thank you. Sorry, quantitative AI, right? Because we have AI in the network, which I think personally is a little bit more important. But anyway, I'm biased. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's the same, because perhaps the banks can figure something out from a security of their clients and trust, where here it's a matter of national security, some of the issues that actually have transpired, right? So that's sort of, and maybe it's the same.
Yeah, well, it's a great debate to have. That's why I'm here, right? It's to tell you that it's more similar than you think, because the Treasury and FFIEC and the FSCCC and NCSC and all these other organizations around CISA, all these organizations around the globe are wrestling with the same thing with regards to financial services. How do we support the small institutions? I can tell you US Treasury alone is specifically like, they need help because they cannot do this alone. So, and I think in that regard, it is absolutely similar. What I think the best thing we can do is that the large banks are setting the standards and paving the way so the research side doesn't have to be done by the smalls, but they still need to implement. Yes. Implementation, you still have how do I embrace cryptocurrency versus AI versus digital payments? So.
So I think you've obviously triggered a great debate, which
Yeah.
we'd love to continue. I would say from a task force perspective, we certainly aim to be as inclusive.
We
as
do have a
inclusive as
very
possible.
large security organization, right? But the focus tends to be on the network and the things, as you mentioned, AI, and so on, okay, and so forth. So it's a matter of allocation, and it's a matter of convincing the top of the hierarchy that this is significant and we need to be thinking about allocation of funds towards some of these problems. Okay,
Completely agree. It's one of the challenges we face in all companies.
I have a small question. I do agree
Please.
with Cliff that, the big operators, Vodafone, AT&T, Verizon, they're investing in this. Do you think the small guys worldwide are going to wait for mandates to do this? Or where you guys think the dominoes will fall?
So one of the things I think we're all hoping is that the large customers, so the AT&Ts, the Vodafones of this world, and Verizon on the one hand, and on the other hand, on the supply side, if you look, Microsoft Cloud, Chromium, IBM, Google, Ericsson, Nokia are already doing proof of concepts around PQC for customers. So if we get the major vendors and the major technology providers and the major consumers, that's perhaps 80% of the problem. Now, it doesn't solve everything because it means you still have to work on the small consumers, the smaller customers, and you have to work on the remaining parts of the ecosystem that are the small firms that don't have capability in engineering either. But at least it gives you a large portion of the overall estate that is secure by design. And then what we have to do is work out what we do about the rest. So that's, I think, our hope, that we can get, by standards, by driving the ecosystem, we get 80% of our estate secure. Then we've got the problem of migrating our existing legacy and what we do with the rest of the technical base that we haven't got a solution to.
But at this time, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, the working group have not estimated what is the size of that legacy. I mean, we're guesstimating, correct?
That's a guesstimate.
Yeah.
So there is a debate ongoing within the task force, and this is why it's really important to have participation from different geographies and from different tier operators, because legacy means very different things if you ask a North American operator versus if you ask, for example, an African operator or South American operator. And that's why the work that the task force is doing, we are aiming to be as inclusive as we can, but we do need to get that diversity of priorities and opinions, and this is, I think that, to the point that was made earlier, are the smaller operators going to be at a disadvantage? Well, in some ways, they may not be at the forefront of this, but they can definitely leverage the experience and leverage even the work that's being done here. So at the moment, we've done a lot of theoretical work. We're now looking at moving to practical work, lessons learned. These are all things that can be leveraged by sort of operators that maybe aren't going to be at the forefront. They're not going to be in the first wave, but they can leverage the experience of those that go before them. So I think that's why a lot of this work is really, really important, not just for the Vodafones, Verizons, and AT&Ts of the world, but also for the smaller operators that can use that experience and use the work that's being done here.
Yeah, well said. I think we may have got time for one more question, if there's any more questions. You've all triggered some fantastic debates. It could be like another panel session. Any other questions? No?
Security or mission critical infrastructure security predominantly, because when you look at the 4G and 5G networks,
Yes.
you're talking about especially protocols like SO7, GTP,
Services, but maybe.
So it's not specific to financial services. I think there's a lot of commonalities in there that we can all learn from. The only part that is, I think, financial services specific in the paper is making the case for action and the real focus on the trust within the ecosystem as the real catalyst for us. That's not the same type of motivation within telco or other industries. But yeah, the steps that you take are absolutely the same, I think, across industry. So yeah. Yeah, and if I may, building on from that, we talked about, the Microsofts and the whatever the world, in financial services, we have vendors that are specific for us that really implement the core services of the smaller institutions. And so the Fiservs, the FISs of the world, the Jack Henrys, et cetera. So as in our case, we're trying to get to those providers as well and saying, what are you doing to help all of your customers? It's not enough to just put this on big Goliath bank. You've got to work with the providers of the services of the smaller firms to make sure that they're up to speed. That can help indirectly the small firms.
Okay, so as a last point, I wanted to thank you all. Thanks to all of the speakers and panelists, and to all of those that are going to be watching online. And I hope that it's been an informative session, that you've learned something, and that you've got some food for thought, some things to take away. So feel free to get in touch, and thank you.